Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Herwig Kusatz, founder of Sound Strategy and author of his new book, Trust You Can Hear. In today's conversation, we will be exploring a fascinating topic that most leaders rarely think about, that is sound. Herwig has spent more than 2 decades helping organizations understand how sound shapes perception, recognition, and trust. In his latest book, he introduces the concept of sonic governance, the idea that while most organizations carefully govern how they look, but very few govern how they sound.
Mhm.
In this episode, we'll explore the role of sound plays in shaping trust and why most organizations overlook it and why sonic governance matters more than ever. So, Hervig, it's such an honor to have you on this show and talk about such a fascinating topic. So, Hervig, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sid. Glad to be here.
And I'm really curious to know a bit about yourself and what really sparked you the idea to write about sound.
Yeah. So I did not start with the idea of sonic governance. I started with music and sound and the experience of how quickly sound can change perception. Later, through client work, teaching, and large organizations, projects, I saw a deeper pattern that many organizations were highly disciplined visually, as you said. They had brand guidelines and design systems and language rules and governance structures. And then I listened to them. Their sound was often very fragmented. A product sounded one way, a video another one, the call center again in another way, the events, the AI voice nowadays, and nobody was really responsible for the whole audible layer. That was the turning point. I realized the problem was not only creative, it was structural. Sound needs leadership, not just production. That became the foundation of sonic governance.
Interesting. But what made you decide or focus on sound as a business or sonic governance? Because your whole business is based on sound strategy, right? So explain us like what do you mean when you say sound and strategy?
Yeah, so I always was fascinated in strategy, in long term thinking, and on the other hand, I'm a very structured and logical person. I would say by myself. And on the other
Okay.
hand, I always loved creativity. I loved to sing in the choir and playing instruments, and also, of course, teaching was a passion or is a passion of mine. And
Mm,
20 years ago, I thought, how could I match these two? Um, Things that I love, the things for long term structure, and on the other hand, combine it with creativity and sound. And so I came up with, I had like three names for my endeavor, and it was one of them was sound strategy. And I read an article by
so Michael Porter,
Porter.
is it
Yeah,
right?
Michael Porter. Yeah,
Yeah.
and and I when I continued reading the article, it started with a sound strategy is, and I'm like, what? That's what I thought about my name. So I thought that's the name. That was a sign for me to choose sound strategy as the name, because sound not only means like what you hear, it also means right and correct in English, if I'm right. Yeah. So that
Mm,
was fascinating for me. And from that point on, I just wanted to bring structure into sound. And I think sonic governance now, I really landed my journey. Yeah.
mm, that sounds good.
Thank you. That was my claim for almost 20 years. But that's a very generic claim because everybody uses it. So that's makes it very nice, but also generic. So now, as you know, my claim is trust you can hear. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's deep dive into this concept, right? And I went to your LinkedIn, and you had a banner on your profile which said, "Brand is governed, but your sound isn't." So could you explain me what do you mean by that?
I think it's something like your visual is governed, I guess. Yeah. So I think that, like the colors of a company, all the icons, the fonts, even the images, even the language is governed. And in sound, sound is not so protected. Like every team kind of comes up with the idea how the sound should be for their area of expertise.
Can you think of maybe an example of a company where they have governed their sound very well, and maybe one example of a company where sound is not governed, if you can think of one?
A good example, I think of my strongest example is public transport. That's where I'm like an expert also. And in public transport, sound is for sure not for entertainment. Nobody stands at the platform and says, "Oh, what a great sound design." It's about safety, it's about access, it's about trusting the system, like do the announcements, the warning cues, the ticket machine, the platform sounds, the vehicle sounds, the service message. All these shape how people experience the system. And the challenge is that these sounds are often handled separately. And one team works on the vehicle, another one on the station, in the stations, another one on the app, another one in communication, and another one for the events or campaigns. And without governance, this experience, as I said, can fragment a lot. So with governance, sound becomes a system. It can help people understand what is happening and move with more confidence and recognize the organization across many moments. So this is not cosmetic, this is a service quality.
Interesting. So I'm curious to know, because this is something that founders or entrepreneurs rarely notice, or leaders, right? So how do you convince executives to care about something that they barely notice?
Yeah, so I would say that comes like to the core idea of the book. Like the core argument is simple. Organizations are no longer only seen and read, they are heard. And they are heard in voices and music and product cues and services, videos, and all these different touch points. And most organizations manage only, as we just discussed, how they look. And many manage what they say, but they don't manage how they sound. And that's a real gap for leaders. And this comes harder to defend. So the book argues that sound is no longer only a creative detail. And so they really should think about governing it. And leaders need to know what their organization sounds like. I mean, that's where they should start by listening. Yeah. And where sound creates value, where it creates risk, and who is responsible for keeping it coherent over time.
Interesting. And you also just gave a panel or a speech, right, about sound strategy recently to an organization. So what was the feedback that they were giving you about their presentation? Was it maybe intriguing, right, for them?
I was very thankful for the feedback. It was great. They said I was funny. I made them laugh. So for me, that means they were listening, and and I and they said that they learned something, that they understood something, that it's not decorative, that it's not about sounding good. It's more about what is the role of the sound. So they really understood it's not just decoration. It's about what role does each sound moment have and how does it help the organization. And I'm very thankful how the talk went. It was a great experience, and I got really great feedback.
That's amazing. And let's deep dive into an example so our listeners can get to know a bit more detail about the importance of sound, right? And you have worked on the transport system as you said about Wiener Linien.
Yeah,
So which part? So before it was a success, I want to know what part of the Wiener Linien project failed before it succeeded. So what was wrong about the sound? Firstly,
yeah. I wouldn't say they failed. They already had very high numbers, like 66% in customer satisfaction. So they are a very professional organization. And
sorry. And before we move on, just for our listeners, Wiener Linien is a public transport company in Vienna, right?
yes, yeah, it's the Viennese transport systems. It's like there's one provider for everything. They they do like the subway, the buses, and the trams. So everything is Wiener Linien. Yeah, it's like 2 million people or every day are riding Wiener Linien. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and they had like a male who was working in the safety department, so at the technician, and he started to record like the announcements, and he had his own charm, let's say it this way, and but it was a little bit, how would you say it in a nice way? It was a little bit very calm, very calm. Yeah, so that's a nice way. But like Wiener Linien, they always do every year. They do customer satisfaction surveys, and the Viennese said they would love to they would like to have a more modern voice, a woman modern woman voice, because the male he was running for 40 years, so that's a long time. and and so that's how the whole project started, that they wanted for sure a new female voice that kind of sounds like the 21st century, like fresh and accessible. And so I listened to, it was 86 or something female voices. And then
Wow.
yeah, it was a lot. And then I invited 8 where I thought they are good. And they all had to kind of say the same phrases. And I presented these 8 women to the leadership board of Wiener Linien, and then they thought that 2 voices are really great, and then they gave these 2 voices to they let the Viennese decide. So over 20,000 people took part and decided for the voice that is now speaking for already 15 years. Yeah.
Wow. And when you were listening to the 60 plus sounds of women, so what made you decide like the top five? Was it like the tone? Was it like how their pace were going? What made you decide that?
Yeah, so it was 80 plus.
80 plus, right?
And we of course had a strategy workshop. So I knew how the voice should sound. And so lots of voices did not fit the principles of how the Wiener Linien wanted to sound. So we
Give
had
us an example. What are the principles? What do you mean?
principles were like, one was, like I said, accessible. Like there were really nice voices. They had like a very deep female, and this didn't work. Yeah, it had to be like a fresh and like accessible. So it's not only one principle. It were many. I don't know all the principles by heart now because it's now some years ago, but I had these principles in front of me when I was listening to a voice, and also the principles that the voice should not be. Yeah. It should, for example, also should not be, I remember, too sexy. That's not the idea of
Yeah.
public transport, you know.
Yeah, true.
a voice should work for every age group, from children to how you call like pensioners, yeah, like every age.
Yeah.
So it had to be a very accessible, friendly, and serious, on the other hand, voice. And that's, I've almost forgot, the voice had to have a pretty good Austrian English. So yeah, so it was allowed to sound Viennese, but you had to understand it. So it had so every person should understand the English of the. It should be a good English, yeah. And that was also very important. And some voices failed because the English, when I got the possibility to listen to the English, I was not satisfied. Yeah. So there were a lot of criterias, and 8 made it. So like 1 out of 10 made it into the finals, and then these 8 I presented, and then the executives. So I was happy with the 8. The executives of Wiener Linien were happy with 2, and the Viennese were happy with 1. So that's how it went. And that was like the reason why they started the whole process, because they realized that that voice, one of the 4 domains, is very important for a brand, because people recognize it. But also another advantage is, people, when they know the voice, it's easier for them to understand the voice, because they are used to the voice, how the voice speaks. So there are many advantages, and I always would recommend to think about one corporate voice for a brand if possible. I mean, of course, there are possibilities where you want like 2, but don't go higher than 2, in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay. And then, but just going back, so why would you change the sound of a transport company, by the way? So was it like the people were complaining, or they were not listening to the announcement properly? So what made them think, okay, right, there's a sound problem?
So the problem for a problem, I would say the challenge was that the male voice really sounded outdated. That was the main issue. And I don't even know that. I don't know if the male voice spoke English. Yeah. And also, they started already. There was like internal, how should I say? They started to use more and more different voices. Like, the male voice was only for the station announcements. But if there was like an information announcement or a disruption announcement,
Yeah.
different voices were there, like at least 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So there was no consistency. That was the real problem. And also, the male voice wanted, I think, to go into his pension also,
Yeah.
I guess. But, that only opened the box, because we did not even speak about cues, like the gongs before an announcement. These are cues, and they had like the default queue the of the provider of the vehicle. So if you would go to another city, you would have the same queue, because it was decided. They bought. It's like, you gave your identity to the to the provider of the vehicle. It had nothing to do with Wiener Linien. So that was very new. And I don't know another city who did it this consistently through every touch point. Yeah. And that was also recognized through many international awards, because they did such a great job. Or we
That's a
did such a great job. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's a video, a link in the description, or you can check out Herwig's website where they have like, I think it's a 10-minute video where it shows the Wiener Linie on how Herwig transformed it, the different sounds they use. So I highly recommend. It's quite an interesting watch.
Yeah,
And
that helps a lot to understand. Lots of people always tell me, "Oh, now I got it. Well, after I saw this video, now I understand."
yeah, and the video helped me understand as well when I was reading your book. So when you mention cues, you mean in the Wiener Linie example, there's a gong sound that hits, and then there's an information or a announcement, etc. So Is that what you mean by cues?
Yes. So I always always tell my my audience they have to learn to listen, and they have to learn four kind of domains to listen for, because sound for many people is a very hard topic to grasp. And so I think I with these four domains it's very easy. So there is voice, as we discussed already, and cues are just like short signals, like the gong before the announcement, but it could be the audio logo or a notification. So cues are just like signals, short signals. And then you have the music that you sometimes use in different sound moments, and you have atmosphere. And atmosphere is like the sound around the sound. It could, in the nature, you would call atmosphere silence. Even it is not, because perhaps you hear a bird, but atmosphere is very important. Also, now we are in a call, and how you hear my room is atmosphere. You know, if there's a hum or something, as we discussed before we started the podcast, atmosphere is very important. Atmosphere gives trust also. So a good atmosphere is a very nice thing. And sometimes you can do like quick fixes, like go closer to the microphone or choose another one or close the window. But getting atmosphere right, like for the long term, is not so easy often, because sometimes the room, you have to change the room from for the sound. Perhaps, like today, yeah, I was in another podcast and it was very full. The hall was very long. So that's a problem for the atmosphere. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, where are we?
No, no, that's quite interesting. We're talking about the Wiener Linear transformation that you have done, and it makes sense on how you have transformed it. So, in a nutshell, so once you found out that the male voice was outdated, so in a nutshell, so what are the little things that you did in that four domains that you mentioned that really transformed the Wiener Linien public transport company?
So we changed for sure all four domains, not only the voice. The voice was the important one, and it also got a very large media echo. So there were like over 100 articles about it, because that's a big topic. If you change the voice of public transport, it's like you change the voice of the city, because that's the voice you hear when you come as a guest or if you live here. So that was a really big deal. On the other hand, we really tried also to change the cues. So to make the cue also consistent through all the touch points, as you probably experienced when you watched the video. And of course, the music is also kind of the backbone of all of this, because musical ideas, they're often the backbone of a sonic DNA. And also, just because you ask for the voice, also the voice was treated in a special way. So everything she says, she starts slow, because that's how a vehicle starts. And when she finishes something, she has to speak slower. Like when a vehicle stops, when a bus or a subway or starts, and it is helpful even for understanding. I try it now. I start slow to speak, and then I can speak like normal speed, and when I finish I become slower. So it's like we try to imitate like the travel also with the voice, and it has also the advantage that it is also easier to understand. And it was also daunting with the speaker, because I had to remind her for 100 times, because it is not usual for her to do this all the time, to start slow. But she did a perfect job, but I had to remind her, because it is not normal. But because it is not normal, it is special when you listen to it. And also, yeah, that's mainly to the voice.
Super clear. Now we have spoken about the sound and the example. So now I want to know from you, why is sonic governance important?
Okay. I would explain what sonic governance means in this way. So, sonic governance is the leadership discipline of managing an organization's audible presence over time. It asks what should this organization sound like? Who owns it? Very important question because often everybody or nobody owns it. And
Yeah,
what principles guide decisions? And how do we keep sound coherent across teams, channels, technologies, and years, to speak about time? And it is not only about creating a sonic logo or a nice piece of music, as I explained. It is about
yeah,
building a decision logic. And without governance, sound becomes random. With governance, sound can support action as the first layer that you have to fix, then recognition and trust. So these are the outcomes, also the business outcomes for an organization.
interesting. And then what would you say? What are the consequences or hidden noise tax, as you mentioned in the book? And noise tax meaning hidden operation costs created by
Yeah.
unmanaged sound. So maybe can
Yeah.
you explain what is that? Maybe give us an example as you shared in the book as well. I can help
Mhm.
our listeners understand more.
Yeah, so the noise tax is the cost an organization pays when sound creates friction instead of value. So it can show up in small ways. A warning sound that creates stress instead of clarity, or a call center voice that feels cold or generic, or a product sound that creates doubt. A video, that's examples, yeah, and a video soundtrack that weakens the message, or an AI voice that does not fit the organization. So each moment looks small. Together, they shape perception, and the organization may not notice the text because nobody measures it as sound, but customers and employees experience it, and they are the signal. And that is why governance matters.
Could you maybe share an example where someone suffered due to not managing their noise tax?
Uh huh.
Maybe the hospital one was a good one. Let's hear it.
Hospital one. Oh, with the alert, with the because there were so many that people died. It's a very sad example. I would bring an easier example. Like the checkout
All right, go
machines.
ahead.
Yeah, because this is a very. I mean, this with the medical is a very good one, but it's also a very dramatic one. I think, yeah, but very important one. But I love the example of the self checkout machines. I mean, we have them in Austria. I guess they are now everywhere on the planet, also in London. That you can self uh, scan your products, right? Do you have them?
Yes, yes, we have
And
them.
and and you experience a beep when you do a checkout, and then you feel like a professional cashier for 3 seconds, yeah. And on the other hand, if you put it in the packaging area and then it says unidentified object, you feel like a criminal. So the beep is very important, yeah. So that here the beep is like when you don't, or when I don't hear a beep, I'm like, is the system not working? So what do I experience? I experience hesitation. I'm like, should I do it again? And then I do it again and it beeps perhaps twice. Then I think, do I have now two? And I start to look. And so here the sound is not helping me. And that's real. That's what noise tax means.
Such a good example. Yeah.
If the sound does not help me to understand, yeah, or what to do next. So that's noise tax for me, yeah, in a simple example that every person experiences. And that's like uh, the lowest failure mode, because that's what an organization has to um, solve first, that the action works, that people understand why there is a sound. because if there is no reasoning, then silence would be the best choice for sure.
That's such an interesting example because I remember when I go to Tesco and buy my groceries, I never look at the screen. I'm just listening to the sound in terms of every item I've scanned. If I hear two on one item, I'm like, okay, it says something wrong. Then I look at the screen, but I'm always just going through the sound and beep.
Yeah, and I have lots of ideas how to bring this experience to the next level, but that's another podcast, I would say. Or it
Share
would
one
be,
example.
for example, I would probably try to be much more musical with these peeps. Yeah. But you have to integrate it in, it has to fit to the organization and everything, because people say to me, why shouldn't that this be a beep? And I think the beep is annoying. Yeah. To be honest. Yeah. And the beep could be Tesco, or it could be IKEA, or it could be my microwave oven judging me at midnight. It could be any sound. So they lose out on the next step, on recognition. Yeah. So
Yeah,
could create recognition that you know where you are, that you buy at Tesco, for example. Yeah.
yeah. Let's
And
say
it
if
has to
someone
be
from
a good experience. So it's not an easy task. I don't say make beep 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 beep. No, no. It has to be a sound where it makes sense. It just makes sense.
mm,
A better decision to it has to be. And yeah, so that's why I said it's a long discussion, because it has to fit to the organization, to the values, to the principles.
so interesting. And let's say if someone from Tesco CEO is listening to this podcast now, and if he asks you, Herwig,
Here
what
I am.
sound,
Call me.
what musical, like off the cuff, you could just make the sound on the mic. What sound would you say the beep should be according to you? What do you know about Tesco? That would be interesting.
For me.
Yes, from you.
So to be honest, I don't know. I don't know Tesco well enough, to be honest. Yeah, to 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 judge Tesco. The first thing I do with a client is to do a strategic audit. So the first thing is I listen where they use sound. For sure, they use the beep, as you told me, and then I would ask all the values and what they are doing and what they want to uh, uh, accomplish and what is their vision. And if Tesco, it depends what is their vision. That's very important. Yeah. For example, if they are playful, this could be a very playful, how you say, way to explore a concept. But if they say we are very premium would mean be more. People don't even realize that there's a sound, but there is kind of. Premium for me is very calm, very. It just does the thing, and you're like, oh yeah, there was a sound. Oh yeah, that was a nice sound. But that's premium for me, like that people don't even recognize that there is something, but it works very well. Yeah, for example, so that's like two very opposite concepts how to approach such a topic as like the beep of the scanner.
Right. I think I was going to ask you a follow-up question in terms of how do you measure noise stacks in an organization? So would it be through auditing and listening as well, or do you have a different way to see what's the noise stacks at a company at the moment?
I mean, what I recommend clients is, because clients normally don't measure sound. And the
Yeah.
way I do it is that I tell them, let's start with one important moment in your, perhaps in your product. Yeah, like if they have a product sound that is very important to them, or an app sound, I say, let's start with this sound. Yeah. And often it's the client who decides, because a sound could sound really nice, and the sound passed lots of meetings and everybody says it's the best sound. And then you play it to the client, and the client hesitates, and that's the signal. Yeah. So measurement should be by the people who use it. Yeah. So that's my recommendation. And when we start to build one measurement logic for a sound, when they got one sound, then we say, come on, let's try two other ones. And suddenly they have three measurements, you know? And with these measurements, it starts that people understand the value of the sound. They see, oh, it's not decoration. Things change. You know, you keep all the other stuff the same because the problem often is you introduce something and you change the sound and the visuals and blah, blah, blah. And then you cannot measure it correctly. So often I recommend only change the sound. And then it's really helpful that they see, oh, the sound changed this. You know, people, for example, didn't listen to it till the end, so they didn't like it. Or, you know, so there are lots of ways how to create this decision logics. But that's like I have, you know, you read my book, like the signal system, and like the measurement is like the last move. Yeah. And then the cycle starts again because then we learned what worked and what didn't work, and then you can improve. Yeah.
Yeah, super clear. And I've really enjoyed this episode, Herwig. It's super clearly explained what sound governance is, sonic governance. And now, like the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I really want to talk about more of your entrepreneurial journey because you're an entrepreneur, you have your own business. So, first question that comes to mind, right, is about how do you handle rejections? Because I'm pretty sure as a founder approaching a lot of executives about sound that they really don't notice. So, how do you personally handle rejections as an entrepreneur?
What kind of rejections do you mean that I?
Just just rejections. I mean, you approach them and they say no, not interested, or you approach them and they don't reply to you, or they say, "Oh, I'll come back to you after," but they never come back to you. How do you stay positive, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, as I start to speak more, you know, so I amplify my voice through podcasts or through conferences, and that helps because don't pray to the people who are not interested, you know. So if they
Yeah,
send me a signal, they're interested. So that's my how is tip or how I deal with it, you know. Like I also think if they're not interested, then I didn't explain it well, or I don't solve a problem they have, or they don't see a problem there. So it's just I think I have to explain things better if they are not interested.
I like that. I like that approach. So taking full ownership of that rather than making excuses, you're taking full ownership. Okay, what
Yeah,
can I do better? And you explain
yeah,
that. That's
yeah.
super clear. And then what's the best business advice or that you have received that really helped you grow your business? Because you've been doing this for decades. So what really helped you keep the business afloat?
For the best business advice, you ask me, right? The best is things take longer than you think. don't don't yeah.
100%.
So and you know, like the you have to believe in yourself, and you also have to like what you do. I really love what I do, so that makes it easy for me to do it. And of course, I have a great wife who supports me. So that's also important that you have a team who helps you when things are not great. So there are lots of how you call them columns, and if one column is not working because in 20 years like corona was tough for me, like clients stopped their contracts because of corona. I was like, oops. Yeah, so that's life. I mean, but I have a really good relationship with my wife and also my with friends. So business is important, but it's not everything. So I meditate. So I don't know if that's a business, but meditation helps me to balance myself for the day. So yeah.
I
I
love
don't need
that.
that much to be honest, to be happy or so I can be successful because I'm not. I'm stubborn in one way. Yeah, I do it for two decades, and I think lots of people would have stopped, and I had to reinvent myself, like with sonic governance. So that's perhaps also an important step for me that I thought I was in a niche with sound branding, and I was not happy in that niche. I said I want to create my own category.
I
That's
love
like
that.
a very important tip, that create your own category in this big world. Yeah. And find your tribe who thinks, yeah, that's good. We need this. Yeah.
I love that, Herwig. And I think this comes back to one of the thing that you mentioned in another podcast about meditation, where you were, I think you were taking a time off and you were in an island, I believe, and
Hmm.
you were meditating as if you're on your deathbed. So you were
Yeah.
looking back
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
thinking, yeah, tell us about that story. It's quite fascinating to me as well, because I think I need to do it once to see
Yeah.
in terms of
So
what
that
comes up in
so
my mind.
yeah, we come back a little bit to the beginning of our podcast, because this was when I came up with sound strategy, and I went to an island, and I imagined laying on the beach, that I'm laying, as you say, on my deathbed, and here I thought, I want to work with sound. That's how it happened. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, because I always did sound as my hobby, like singing and teaching, and never as my profession. And that's how I decided, because I said, if I look back at a successful life, I changed people's perception about sound. And I was curious, because I even didn't know what it is. I only knew it was something I wanted to connect strategy and sound. Yeah. So like logic and creativity.
I love that. So you might not have the entire picture on how the future is going to look like, but even if you have little bits of idea, we just you should go for it, and the idea will develop as you go, right? That
Yes, 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 and I was very lucky in the beginning. Looking back, so
yeah.
sometimes it's not good. I mean, like getting Adidas as a client worldwide, that was
Ooh.
lucky. I'm like, oh, that's easy.
Yeah. How
And
did that happen, by the way?
oh, I created two businesses, and in the other business, I created like a customized CD where you could create your own CD as a present, and our
Wow.
designer presented it at a conference, and somebody from Adidas walked up, and she loved all the music we had. We had like over 100 independent music labels, and she said, "Can we use that music for our?" And so he told me that, and I got in contact with her, and we worked for many years together. It worked fine. So it was easy, kind of. And then I realized, oh, that's also business, kind of. Yeah. So that's what I did with sound strategy, because I was consulting her as a business consultant with, yeah. So that's how it started. And I think, like when things don't go well, like Corona for myself, the I in afterwards I'm happy how I pivoted from it. Yeah. So there was the time that I saw, oh, it's not working. They're not coming. Clients are not rushing in by the door.
Yeah.
I had to think, what is the problem that organizations have, and which problems do I want to solve also? Because I want to solve problems that are really helpful for society. So if you help like public transport, that's like something I'm proud of doing. Yeah. Because
Mhm.
that's a good thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if I ever visit Vienna, I'm at the station. I'm listening to the sound that you have created, Warwick.
Yeah, I also created
That's
sounds for
amazing.
the train stations of Austria. So you can hear me all over Austria. But
So I
perhaps
can't.
we'll
So I
see
can't wait.
what the future brings.
Yeah, you never know. You might do the London transport as well, because we hear the same thing over and over again. Mind the gap between the
Yeah,
platform and the station.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And final question before we wrap up. So why should our listeners read your book? So why they should read your book? Give
Why they
them
should
your
read the book?
yeah.
Good question. Why should they read the book? They should read the book to understand how they can build trust through sound. Yeah, because if they want that their organization, that people trust their organization, and they don't manage sound, they leave out a big part of trust building.
Mm.
That's in a that's how I would say it in a sentence. Yeah. But many organizations they get much more out of it because lots of organizations even don't get like the action part right, you know, that they don't think about every sound. Why should there be a sound? What value does this sound create? As I said, if there's no value, silence is the best sound. Yeah. And then recognition starts, and trust is pretty hard because trust is to be recognizable through the whole journey of an organization. That's the reason why they should read the book, to understand how this builds up.
That's amazing. And I've read the book to our listeners and I really enjoyed it. It's a fascinating read and it gives you a different perspective. And when I read the book and when I went to work, it was like I became like Spider-Man. I was like listening to all the sounds, I became aware about it. So I highly recommend to read the book as well. Link the Amazon link in the description. So you can check it out. I'll link Herwig's all social media handles in the show notes. So you can check him out as well. And thank you once again, Herwig. It was so much fun to talk to you tonight.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you very much. It was great talking to you.